All right, good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to what I often like to call the virtual California African American Museum. My name is Alexandra Mitchell, and I'm the manager of education and public programs at CAM. As I say every time, I'm so delighted that you've chosen to spend a small part of your day with us. Tonight is a really incredible program, and I'm really excited to close out our robust series of Women's History Month programming with such a dynamic, incredible group of women artists, Black women artists. Those standards of what constitutes beauty have broadened. Black women remain underrepresented in mass media depictions of ideal beauty, where Eurocentric aesthetics still dominate. In this conversation during Women's History Month, moderated by Assistant Curator Taylor Bythewood-Porter, tonight's artists, Genevieve Gaignard, Deborah Roberts, and Grace Lynne Haynes, share how their work explores imagining Black women in the shaping of racial and personal identity. Grace Lynne Haynes is a California-born visual artist currently based in New Jersey. She creates lusciously composed paintings containing bright textures and patterns. Intricate moments are juxtaposed against flat Black swaths of paint shaped to represent Black female bodies. Hayes was an inaugural member of the incredible Kehinde Wiley's Black Rock Senegal residency and is included in the 2020 edition of Forbes 30 Under 30 in Art and Style. Her first Los Angeles solo exhibition is in March of this year at the Band of Vices Gallery, and she will follow it up with a solo exhibit at the Luce Gallery in Italy in 2022. She was a selected artist in Daily Collector's online article, 20 Painters Who Are Shaping the Next Decade. She surely is. And her work has been published in Vogue, LA Weekly, New American Paintings, Whitehall Magazine, Culture Type, and on the cover of The New Yorker, among many other publications. Deborah Roberts is a mixed media artist whose work challenges the notion of ideal beauty. Her work has been exhibited internationally and across the US and Europe. Roberts' work is in the collections in many institutions, including the Whit Museum of American Art and the Studio Museum in Harlem. She was selected to participate in the Robin Rauschenberg residency and is the recipient of the anonymous Was a Woman grant, the Polak Krasner Foundation grant, and the Ginsberg Clause Award Fellowship. Roberts received her MFA from Syracuse University in New York. She lives and works in Austin, Texas. She has a solo exhibition opening, it's actually already open, this is an bio, at the Contemporary in Austin. And lastly, but certainly not least, Genevieve Gaignard is a Los Angeles-based artist whose work focuses on installation, sculpture, and photographic self-portraiture to explore race, femininity, and class. As a biracial woman in America, Gaignard investigates the aesthetic and cultural divide between Black and white, a chasm as palpable as it is visible. She interrogates notions of passing by positioning her own female body as the chief site of exploration, challenging viewers to navigate the powers and anxieties of intersectional identity. Her work has been included in numerous solo and group exhibitions, including the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and beloved CAM, among many others. She received her BFA in photography from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design and her MFA in photography from Yale University. Tonight's conversation is moderated by Taylor Bythewood-Porter, who has served as an assistant curator here at CAM since 2017. She is the curator of the museum's upcoming exhibition, Rites and Rituals, The Making of African-American Debutante Culture, which fingers crossed opens in late May. Bythewood-Porter has also co-curated a number of CAM exhibitions, including the much celebrated Cross Colors, Black Fashion in the 20th Century. Prior to Bythewood-Porter's appointment at CAM, she served as president and founding member of SIA Curates, a curatorial organization run through Sotheby's Institute of Art at Claremont Graduate University that connects aspiring curators with Claremont's MFA students to help develop yearly exhibitions. She holds her she holds her Master of Arts in Art Business with a concentration in Contemporary Art from Sotheby's Institute at Claremont, the Graduate University Center there, and the Bachelor of Arts in Communication with a focus on public relations and journalism, and a minor in art history from Maynooth University. I invite you to engage tonight's panelist and moderator in the conversation, and with that, I turn the conversation over to tonight's panelist.
Hello, hi everyone. Oh, nice. I'd love to see all your faces. It's so nice to be able to be here tonight with you all. I know everybody's in different parts of the country, so I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate taking time out of your schedules, to talk with me and the CAM audience. I'm super excited about tonight. As I mentioned before, to you ladies, I've been following all your careers for such a long time. So for me, this is really an absolute thrill to kind of dive in a little bit more into the work that you do and to share that work with our CAM audience. To kind of get started and situated, I just wanted to share with the CAM audience some slides so they can become a little bit more familiar with your work as well, just in case they're not. So I'm gonna share my screen. So a little bit about this program, I Am Woman. For me, it really began from, the work that I was doing with rites and rituals, the history of African-American debutante culture, which again should be opening at the end of May this year. As I was doing research for that show and putting it all together and working with different debutante organizations, one thing that I really came to the forefront of my mind is the work that they were doing in terms of uplifting Black women and really challenging these constructed ideas of femininity and beauty. And when I was thinking about that, the first thing I was thinking about actually was your works. So just to get started, I want to share some works. Genevieve Gaignard. For me, I think the first experience I had with Genevieve and your work was actually at CAM. It was a little bit before I officially started. So when I started at the museum in 2017, for me, like everybody's like, oh, did you see Genevieve's show? Did you see her works? She created this domestic interior space, and she does these photographs of herself and she embodies all these different characters. And for me, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can see myself in these images. I see myself in this room. And for me, that really touched me. And then I think the last thing I would like to say about you, Genevieve, and we'll dig into more, is really your goal and really thinking about like selling to Black collectors and creating this type of relationship again with the artists and collectors, and really again giving back to the community. And I think that's really, for me, really important about your works. And I feel like everyone kind of touches base on that kind of giving back in different ways. With Deborah, for me, I came in contact with your works again at CAM, and I met you there once. It was so much fun getting to meet you. And really, again, digging into your collages, again, this kind of focus on young Black girls and boys, and really looking at, again, these kind of fragmented pieces, how you're creating, again, these figures, looking at historical magazines and even pop culture references that you like to incorporate into your figures. Again, for me, seeing this, I see a reflection of myself. And it's all those things. For me, I feel it's really important, especially as you're moving through art spaces such as museums or galleries. For me, I grew up in New Jersey, and going to the Met and those larger institutions, and I rarely saw a reflection of myself. And so to have artists such as you, Deborah, and even Grace, putting these images out there in the world, for me, it gives me so much joy and hope to see these like bright, colorful textures and patterns, to be able to see, this rich darkness of these women. For me, again, it's nice to be able to see, again, a reflection on the wall, and even more so, I think, in print. It's coming into your homes as well. Again, this upliftment, this color, this joy. and I'm so, again, just so excited to talk to you all more about your inspiration, and again, like where all this is kind of coming from you guys and your journey. So let's see. So kind of to dig in, again, for me, as I was thinking about this program and having you guys all together today, I was actually really reflecting on my own personal journey. And I would love to know from all of you guys, I'll open it up. Was there a particular moment where you remember becoming conscious of the ways that mass media shaped your personal identity as women of color?
I think for me, when I noticed that there was a difference in the images that I was seeing on TV as a little girl, happened very early. You know, you become enamored with these models, and this idea, this notion of beauty, and the world tells you these women are special, but they don't look like you. So you tend to be drawn to women and images of Black women that you find don't look like those, but just as beautiful. Like I was telling somebody the other day that Mary McLeod Bethune, although she was not this notion of ideal beauty, the strength that she had, the way she changed lives, that was beautiful to me. So I think for me, the notion of beauty tends not just to be the outer beauty, but also the inner beauty. And those were my aunts and my mom and people like that I looked to for that type of strength when I was young.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
sorry.
No, you
growing, growing up in a social media era, I often used the online world to really develop positive images of women that look like me. I think when I was a teenager, I was really interested in Tumblr, and that was the first website where I saw Black women wearing their natural hair. And then there was the natural hair movement coming back. And there was also so many communities online that were celebrating Black women wearing our natural hair texture. And that really encouraged me to go natural as well. And I think seeing different types of Black women online, on Tumblr, on Instagram, just seeing the world outside of my little hub in South Central LA really encouraged me to embrace all different sides of my identity. And I think we're lucky to be in a generation where we're seeing so many different types of Black women portrayed on screen. It can be better, but it is improving. Like we have Issa Rae, awkward Black girl, which I definitely relate as an awkward Black girl. And growing up, I didn't see those type of images. So I think there's becoming more nuance in being shown in our experience. Of course, it could be better, but I think with the images that we see right now, there are TV shows and characters that really resonate with me.
And Genevieve, what about you?
I would say it's constantly like evolving based on as my community builds, like my kind of cohort of artists and strong women that I can kind of learn from a young age. I think we all kind of go through that feeling of not fitting that ideal, and that can range from a lot of different things. But I felt um yeah, I've constantly always felt like I didn't fit in. And whether that was physically or kind of more mentally, just feeling like, okay, I'm not fully aware of like my differences in the sense of like being in a predominantly white community growing up, but just feeling like I wasn't quite on the same wave as everyone else that was surrounding me. And as I've kind of developed my voice through my art, I've been able to like work through that stuff, and again, to be here with you all and just like continue these conversations and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable are ways that we can kind of continue to break the kind of standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, you definitely hit the nail on the head. Growing up in, at least for me, growing up in New Jersey, in the suburbs, It was very much, you know, white oriented town, and there wasn't a lot of, you know, ethnicity, people of color. And yeah, it was almost like you kind of had to find your way on your own, look outward and look through like media or like magazines to kind of have an idea of like, well, what is this? Especially, you know, when you're a young girl and you're, you know, you're flipping through teen magazine and you're trying to find a cute hairstyle, and they're saying get this shampoo and it'll make your hair, you know, be good. And so you get the shampoo and it doesn't work out, and you're like, well, why isn't it? Because it's not meant for you. And you have to really dig in those things. It definitely was a learning experience for me. And right, you need to go and you kind of find your community to kind of like really uplift and support you. But really, I feel like that that age group, right, it's really, really pivotal to really have that understanding. And I know, Deborah, with a lot of your works, you're really focusing on, you know, that youth, you know, young Black children. And I would love to find out a little bit more from you. Why, you know, is it that reason why? Like, why specifically narrow in on that particular age rather than something, you know, teen or more of like a young adult?
Right. Well, I felt when I was thinking about the work that I wanted to do, is that was the age when you started thinking about your independence, how you going to move forward in that world. You know, you wanted a little bit more freedom from your mother. My mom was very, you know, like she would do all our hair till I think we were 12. And you know, I didn't always want two ponytails and things like that. And I didn't always want to wear the same clothes and the colors that my sisters had. So when I thought about doing the thesis of this work, that was when I started gaining independence and figuring out who I was and how I was going to move forward. And so I think that the little girls and boys in my work are at that point, but society doesn't stereotype them so much that we have to fight through these stereotypes in order to be seen as an individual, not a monolithic group. And so children, it's just so important, that age, because if people destroy your inner beauty before you even get started, I mean, it changes who you're supposed to be. And I'm trying to highlight that, you know, these are really just children and we need to protect them. They're just as vulnerable as anyone else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely feel that when you're looking at your works, and then especially, I guess, how you're again incorporating like, you know, pop culture images. Like, I was looking at one and I was like, wait a minute, I feel like those are the hands of Rosa Parks that you were incorporating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like
Right.
how, right, you're really thinking about that as you're, you know, going through and trying to find images to incorporate in your collage. You know, what are you looking for? Or like, what kind of jumps out at you and sparks your interest?
Right. Well, almost anything. But I tell people that the four-pronged approach to me creating these collages, how I build these collages, it's American history, Black history, pop culture, and pop culture, and then Black culture. So all those things mixed together, because pop culture and Black culture is different, and Black history and American history is different. And so, and because American history don't include enough of Black history in it, so there's several different things. So I gather all those things and I start from there, what I want to talk about, and then I build the collages based on that. Yeah,
Nice.
and I know we talked about earlier about magazine covers. I don't use magazines in my work. I mean, my research is all just, you know, I just go through. I try to find faces that from other countries that I feel have not been touched by pop culture, but have been maybe touched by violence or some type of natural disaster, but that beauty shines through, that joy and innocence of a child is there and it's present. And that is what I'm looking for in my collage. And that's what I hope that when people see the work, they see that. They see that joy, that innocence, and that beauty, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of depth to that, especially like using those, you know, historical images. And, you know, it
Right.
definitely reminds me a lot of some of the work, Genevieve, that you do, right? Because you're also including, you know, collage in your work. But then it's also at the same time, when I'm thinking about like your photography, it's also very this like performative aspect of it. You know, when you're embodying these kind of characters, you know, what goes through your mind? Because you know, when you're looking like you're at one point, right, you're this it looks like you're like a high society woman, and then the other you're a girl on the from the streets. Like, I love how you can do all those different things, right? It's so dynamic, a lot of like with Deborah's work. So I would love to hear a little bit more about like what goes through your mind when you're thinking of what characters to create and embody, and what goes through your mind as you're going through the shoot. Do you have music playing?
Honestly, it's really like playing up a lot of my insecurity of like just not kind of feeling like I fit in anywhere. And so, you know, making the photographs that I make actually is a lot harder for me than, you know, than exciting. Like, I get excited once the picture has been made. And I think it's just kind of boils down to like feeling like I navigate through the world is kind of not really people knowing how to read me. And so then when I put on another costume or, you know, take on this other character, there is a sense of like wanting to own that. But because I am playing a lot off of a lot of stereotypes of folks, that it's kind of like I then have another layer of like, well, I don't actually know how it feels for this person to navigate through the world either. So I'm not really answering any questions with that process, but the end result is to kind of talk to the viewer about how we kind of make these quick reads on each other to put each other in boxes. And, you know, there is this sense of like, everyone wants to belong to something, you know, but we also want to stand out as individuals. So it's just like finding that balance, finding your community, but not assuming to know someone's whole story based on how you see them and how they show up in that moment.
Oh yeah, that's definitely really impactful. Because I think, you know, when I come and I see and I approach your works, it's like, right, you have this, like, you know, the one where it's like hood rat things, there's an image, and you make those connections, right, about those, oh, was a stereotype, right, the hoop earrings, but then in another image, right, you're completely different, is a whole nother persona. For me, it's just, yeah, it just shows the complexities of womanhood and of life. You know, there's no, you can't just put everybody in the same box. It's going to be different for everybody. But for me, what I really enjoy about your work is just, you know, the colors, how you're really thinking about that in the space, right? Sometimes they're bold and sometimes they're like soft and more feminine. And, you know, I really would like to talk to you, Genevieve, and also you, Grace, because you play a lot with color and texture in your work. So I would love to hear from both of you, you know, what do you hope people see in the portraits that you do?
I guess I'll attack that question more on the color front and say that, you know, over time I've developed a certain palette that I feel comfortable working in, that is just another like powerful tool to kind of get to the thing. And I think similar to Grace, and even in some of Deborah's stuff, you know, using these kind of typically feminine color palettes. And I think often we're kind of told to think certain things about those colors, or that those colors exude a certain, you know, innocence or, you know, daintiness, or like we don't get to like harder things or, you know, deeper issues. But I think the strength in how we all use it is it's this way to kind of lure the viewer in. And then once you're there, once you're in that safe space to kind of, you know, whatever brought you there through the colors, you can start to unpack your kind of, you know, deeper rooted questions or issues around those other topics that are being addressed in the work.
Nice, nice. And Grace, what about you? How are you approaching color and pattern in your work? Because I know when we spoke a little bit of the other day, you were talking about your experience at Black Rock.
Yes, color and pattern have always been a part of my life in terms of like the way I dress. I have a very specific color palette that I like to work with in my work. And for me, I was really inspired by Kerry James Marshall's quote where he says that the darker you are, basically the more marginalized you are. And I thought about how that quote relates to me specifically as not just a Black person, but as a woman. And to me, it's like the darker you are, the less feminine you are perceived to be. And I think that really affects Black women as a whole, because a lot of times we aren't given the privilege to embrace our womanhood because of this harsh intersection of racism and sexism. And so in my work, I wanted to show Black, pure Black, as feminine, as divine. And I also wanted to show it in safe spaces. And I'm really intrigued by the contrast of dark and light being able to coexist in one image without the dark being the evil, but the dark being the central focus. And so that's something that I strive to challenge in my work, is dark and light not at odds, but coexisting, and the dark not being seen as what is sinister. I'm also intrigued by who Black women are behind closed doors and outside of the public eye, who we are in our homes, how we decorate our spaces, how our bodies look in leisurely positions. And I'm really intrigued by the Black female body at rest and at leisure, because that's something that we don't often get to do. And that's been inspired by my own personal experience that I've had with constantly working and like tiring myself out and giving myself permission to rest. In regards to patterns, I was really connected to the patterns that I saw when I was in Senegal at the Black Rock residency, because they have these beautiful and amazing patterns, and they juxtapose them in such interesting ways. Like there aren't linear rules like we have here in the West. It's more like you can wear striped pants and a polka dot top and it will look totally amazing. So I was really inspired by kind of breaking those rules of what patterns are supposedly supposed to go together, and juxtaposing and clashing all these different patterns and textures together.
Oh yeah, that's really exciting. I really like how you're talking about right, like really breaking rules. I'm all for breaking rules sometimes. But especially right, like again, I think it just circles back to kind of the larger conversation of, not wanting to be inside a box, that we're so much more complex, and really looking at all the different facets of womanhood. And, I think going back to, again, like this early thinking about Deborah, what you were talking about before, again, this really focusing on the youth element, and really thinking about that time when you're looking to be liberated, free from parents, and you think you're an adult and you're having all these outside pressures being put upon you. I really love how you're literally just creating this new like Black female identity in your work. For me, it's just like this new creature, especially the ones, the works where you're seeing them fighting and right, like protecting, getting their justice. For me, I'm like, yeah, fight for yourself. I'm learning now, like, to stand up for yourself and ask for what you want. And so I really like how you're kind of been doing that. And for me, I would really like to know from you, Deborah, how do you think your work, challenges the existing ideas of what beauty is, what power is? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, it's so weird. The computer told me too.
Okay.
It's so weird because I think when I have the boxing gloves, which I don't really have in my work that much anymore, it was like, when do these, as Black women, when do our power begin? When do we have to start fighting for our own beauty? And I think it's very early. And those gloves come on when we're about 15. About the time we're 25, we've already been fighting 10 years about trying to society to see us as these beautiful Black, like you said, Black creatures walking around in our own light. And with me, with these little girls, it's just this idea of taking on that role very early. Black girls sometimes have to, take on a lot of roles at home, so they seem and present themselves as less vulnerable. Maybe they speak more and have more opinionated. It's because we have to, but doesn't mean just because you have an idea of who you are and what you want to do and what you don't want to do, that you're not vulnerable and in the line of fire with someone who's coming to totally destroy you. So yeah, I have a lot of ideas of Black power in my work and Black independence, because I think it's very important that we have to do that. And I wish we didn't have to fight so often. I wish we could just be cared for and loved and put on pedestals and and not mistreated. But we know that is not true. And so some of the work that I'm doing is challenging those notions of, maybe I do want the door open for me. And maybe I could open the door myself, but I want the option, and sometimes as we move through the world, people don't treat us the same. They don't grab the door and open it for us. And so, I'm not a feminist in that way. You see me, open the damn door, because I don't feel like open. So, that's how my functions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it just, for me, it just like, it's more of a, for me, it just signals that there's more of a need for more like safe, such as, this, right, a conversation that we can all have together freely and openly, with our, viewers out there in the ether, just watching us. But also in, like beauty salons, or, when they are open, or even in just the comfort of our own homes, which we should all be at now. But like, as we're thinking about these, like creating safe spaces, Genevieve, and even you, Grace, a little bit in your work, right? More on like on the page rather than like actual physical space. I really love to hear more, from the both of you, as you're creating these, safe spaces. What does, with Genevieve, as they're like the physical space, what does that medium allow you to do? And then Grace, what do you hope to show with, these women lying back in leisure and at home?
I'll speak specifically to the installation I did at CAM, and really considering my audience. And I wanted, I was imagining young children coming there, because they did a lot, they do a lot of school tours where they did. And so just kind of picturing young girls with their families coming in or with their schoolmates and walking into a space where they truly saw themselves. And so much to the point where you almost forget that you're in a museum or in like an art space, which is what I'm interested in when that kind of change happens. But then also like juxtaposing different things to kind of create almost the tension, or in some ways showing how these disparate things can actually like live, or seemingly disparate things can like live together, which is kind of how I feel, like kind of bringing kind of stereotypically like Black culture and stereotypically white culture, like bringing those things together in sometimes subtle ways, because I really wanted to celebrate it as more of a Black space. And yeah, like that kind of idea of like similar to Deborah, just like as a young girl, like where do you kind of see yourself? And when you're walking into that particular bedroom that you kind of shared in the presentation, that kind of safe space that you're alone with your thoughts, you're looking in the mirror, you're kind of, you're surrounding yourself with the things that you feel comfortable with, but you're also kind of having all of those, I don't know, heavier, deeper thoughts and just trying to process in that safe space. So like for folks to walk into that space and see that, a room that feels like home is celebrated, is looked at as something special to inspect in a deeper way, to care about. And I don't know, that's kind of what I was thinking about with that particular install.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me, yeah, you definitely make some really good points, right? Like walking into the space and having, right, white culture, Black culture in the same. And then, yeah, Grace, you kind of have a little bit of that too in your works, but more of course, like, with your color palette that you use. So yeah, I would love to hear more from you about the safe space that you're creating in your works.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued by the way we decorate our homes. I believe that being able to take time to decorate your home and make it a safe space is a sign of thriving. I think when you're constantly in survival mode, it's very hard to curate a space that is sacred and divine. And so for me, it's exploring how we as women decorate our interiors. It's not just like interiors physically, but it also is a representation of our interior lives, what's going on internally and how that is expressed externally, and also exploring these ideas of aesthetics and colors. What colors are we drawn to? How do certain colors represent our culture? And how can we challenge how we see certain colors with particular cultures? And I really want to expand on these ideas in my work. Like in one of my paintings, I show a woman with a tambourine, and the piece is called Sunday Morning because oftentimes when we go to church, you have the tambourines that you're playing when you're in church. And so showing these different objects that we use in our culture and our day-to-day life and how that looks like in our interior lives. And so maybe those objects are used for the public, but how does that object look in an interior space and how is that used and curated? And so it's really about exploring how we curate these safe spaces, especially in an era right now where we're leading in college degrees. Black women are starting our own businesses, so we have the means to create these spaces that are divine to us, and it's really the only space we have in the world where we're not judged by our gender and our race. And so I'm really curious to explore those types of interiors.
Oh yeah, that's definitely really interesting how, like you're mentioning, that right now we have this moment where we are occupying more spaces, where we're getting our voices out. More people are starting to really recognize, and it really just really, for me, it brings me back to kind of like something more, a little bit more topical. And I'll open this up to the group. How I would love to know, how do conversations about social justice and equality really intersect for you all with the experiences of this past year, with especially with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. It definitely impacted a lot of the nation and the world. And I would just love to know, how are you thinking about those events in your work? Deborah, did you want to start?
Yeah, well, for me, I've included some of those things, and especially my work at my show right now. I did, Good Trouble. I did a lot of pieces that the unseen. I did a lot of pieces that spoke to the notion of when Black people peacefully protest, they are seen as animals, and when people storm the Capitol, they are patriots. And the differences in which they are police. So I've tried to put all those things in my work. When I talk about my recent work with the 9-year-old little girl who was having a mental crisis, and she was the trauma that was put on her by pepper spraying her in her face, things like that. Those things seep into my work, and I try to highlight them because it's so very important. When I think sometimes Black people are not seen as human and have human feelings and things like that. So yeah, it's very prevalent in my work. Activism is a part of it. It just has to be.
Yeah, definitely. Genevieve, what about you?
We're I'm kind of keeping dialogue between my other artist friends open. So we're obviously like having conversations about these things, and it's impossible for us to not address it. And sometimes they're not in obvious ways, but doesn't mean we're not affected by it. I do tend to take more, as I feel like stronger in my voice, to take more of a stance in particular works that I do. But yeah, I mean, it just felt like all we could do is kind of respond through all the chaos and the hatred that just kind of was unfolding day by day on the TV. So we were kind of stuck in front of that. And a lot of us, I don't know, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but like I was feeling like I'm not the person necessarily that takes to the street, although I'm totally grateful for all of the community members that did protest in that way. But yeah, I think artists are definitely putting a message out through their work. I mean, I'm not specifically addressing, I mean, I kind of feel like I've touched on every person's life that was taken in this past year or two, that, it's gotta really shift. And, it's slowly something, lots of things are shifting, but it's not necessarily all the actions that we need to be taking. But just having a platform to share our perspective and our voice is I guess something to celebrate as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think, like you were saying, some of this work you guys were already doing beforehand, and now people are just kind of catching up. But, Grace, I would love to also hear from you about how you're thinking about, this past year's events, and how it's, changed or affected the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I think exploring new forms of resistance has been something that I've been trying to incorporate not just in my practice but in my everyday life. I think sometimes like I strive to focus on spaces of existence versus resistance, and how simply existing as a Black body, as a Black person, can almost form as a stage as a state of resistance. Like right now we have hashtags like carefree Black girl or Black boy joy. And I'm really interested in how looking after our well-being and prioritizing our mental state and our mental health can really be a form of resistance. I think that the past few years when I went to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, I did a lot of labor for the institution in terms of trying to make it more progressive. And I realized as Black women, oftentimes we are the backbones of our community. We're always doing some type of labor for society. Like even Kamala Harris said that Black women, we are the backbones of this country. And it's like, that's great, but that's hard too. That's a huge burden. And so for me, it's like, it's like, that's a lot of pressure, to put on such a small group in the country that's also very marginalized and oppressed. And so for me, I'm trying to explore how we as Black women can find new ways to just simply exist and be at peace and find that joy and manifest these safe spaces in our life. Because oftentimes as a Black woman who has performed a lot of labor for institutions and this in society, being an artist in itself is a form of labor, because we're trying to because we have to, there's a labor of representation as well, of having to carry that weight on your shoulder to represent. So for me, it's just really how can we take off some of that weight of the world and create a society for our future children to really be more at peace, and how can we find rest within ourselves Sometimes you don't have to protest. I definitely support protests, but maybe sometimes that the chaos that happens sometimes during protests with the police attacking can be too much on your mental state. So maybe sometimes it's best to stay at home or maybe donate to a cause, or find other ways that you can give back to the cause without risking your well-being.
No, I definitely agree. Hearing what both you and what Genevieve were saying about not necessarily participating in the protest, but just from sitting back and kind of looking at it and then still supporting, but in the safety of your home, kind of a thing. Like I completely get that. For me, I think there's more than one way to protest and challenge the system that's in place. Whether it be physically, like being in the streets and doing that work. For me, I like to think I do try to do that through my curation, and really focus on subjects and really bring that to light. And I see all you wonderful women are doing that through your art. For a moment in time, I was thinking, I'm like, would I consider this kind of like a protest, their work protest art? I mean, it is in a sense, right? Where you're saying you're going against like this institutional idea of Black feminism and beauty, and you're bringing this type of awareness and you're sparking these conversations that we're having today. And so for me, that just it's really exciting. And I kind of want to go back to something that you kind of said, Grace, a little bit about, labor and that idea of labor. And really thinking about that kind of work that you guys are all doing. And it really made me think about, Genevieve, what the Sell to Black Collectors piece that I showed earlier in the presentation, and how at the Frieze Los Angeles Art Fair in February 2020, that you wore a dress that said Sell to Black Collectors. And what other ways are you incorporating inclusion and thinking about equality in that kind of a sense?
Me first. I mean, I guess I kind of stumble on the sense of like thinking of what I do as protest or taking a stance, but it's just like speaking your mind, and it feels like everyone else kind of takes advantage of that. So why aren't we, like broadening that? And when I take a stance on something, I'm definitely scared because I'm like, okay, this maybe isn't really talked about or something, but I feel strongly enough about it. So that's kind of how I move. I'm pretty much always nervous about taking a stance on something, but just kind of sticking to my guns and hoping for the best, because you're definitely not going to agree with everybody, or not everyone's going to agree with the message you're putting out there necessarily. But I think how I've continued is, by supporting other artists of color, maybe that haven't had like the same platform to show their work. Really specifically like early pandemic, when, folks were really crunching the numbers and just not having enough to get by, and just trying to like kind of connect with artists and donate money as much as I could. And I guess also curating a show that I did online during a residency I was doing during the pandemic, and featuring predominantly artists of color, things like that, I guess. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely see that. It's about helping out one another, and like using your voice and standing up for what you think is right. I think as women, we're always kind of taught to, be quiet, just go with what everybody else is saying. But it's these ideas of speaking up for yourself, using your voice. And I think for me, it was, for a while, I kept my thoughts and ideas to myself. And it wasn't until probably I went to university where it was like, I'm going to start to just ask questions and in class, and then you're finding out more people feel the same way as you, and then you're in this kind of community. So it definitely makes sense to be able to have, again, these conversations between, you know, artists, between collectors, between patrons. There's more than one way to participate in, you know, the larger conversation. But before we kind of transition to opening it up for questions to the audience, something, Deborah, that you said I thought was really fascinating. I want to touch on it, and then also open it up to the group. What does feminism mean to you?
I don't know.
I know everybody has a different idea. It's a big thing, because I know you're like, I'm not a feminist, but what would you call yourself? What's your idea of feminism?
I'm not a feminist, but I believe in independence. I believe in still being taken care of. I don't think you should have one without the other, and they can work together. And I think it's how you enter the world. You know, I'm all for choices and whatever that expands your life, so you have the beauty to live exactly the way you want to. So if that is being a feminist, then yes. If that's being the person who's independent and a free thinker, which is one thing I always, you know, champion, this idea of thinking what's right for me and my body. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'm a feminist or not, but I may be on the curve. I might be on the line. I go either way, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace, what about you? What does feminism mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, like I was like hardcore feminist, like really like girl power, women empowerment. But as I grew a little older, I began to really question, especially mainstream feminism and how it's really not for Black women. I mean, this idea that women are strong and independent, like Black women, we've always been strong and independent because we've had to be. So how does that apply to me? And so I really just started to redefine what feminism meant for me. Maybe I'm more of a womanist. I'm more about like Deborah was saying, like doing what's best for you as an individual. I was watching these channels about housewives, and they were saying how they're feminists because they want to be housewives. But in mainstream feminism, it's like that's not feminist, that's not progressive. And it's like, no, like she wants to be a housewife, so she should be able to do what's best for her life and for her goals. And so for me, it's really just about women having autonomy over their bodies, autonomy over their life decisions, and really living for oneself. And if that's what feminism is, then I'm a feminist. But again, there's just so much different definitions that it makes it a little gray areas, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely get that. Genevieve, what about you? What does feminism mean to you?
I think of it, I guess, more of like an analogy. If we're like in this box of feminism and like it's evolved, and thinking of this box having all of these different doors that we can kind of come in and out as we want, and kind of show up in however we feel suits the moment, the situation, and not really being stuck in one kind of frame of mind to like put a stamp on what feminism is.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I think when I was younger, right, the thought of like, oh, you're a feminist, you know, you're burning your bra, not shaving, no more shaving, you know, this is what it is. And so I think in the beginning, like that definition, I'm like, no, I'm not a feminist. But then over time, I'm like, but yeah, it's about it's my choice. It's my life. It's my body. I want to be able to make those kind of choices. And so then I remember having a conversation with my friend, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm a pseudo feminist. I'm like, no, if you believe you are a free thinking woman and you want other women to be free thinking, then that's it. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, I'm a feminist. Why not? You know, I'm all for female empowerment. Michelle Obama, Beyonce, like I'm all rooting for them all. I'm sure we all are. But it's just really nice to see. And, you know, for me, even now for Women's History Month, I think that you know, for me growing up, it was never really a thing. Like, it's this new moment now that we're seeing everywhere on media, you know, on my Hulu scroll, you know, there's the advertisement, we are women, we can do this. I'm like, where was this? This wasn't happening 10 years ago. Where is this all coming from now? But I'm definitely love it. I definitely love it. And then I guess a follow-up question is like, how are you thinking? How are you showing free choice and this type of, you know, your ideas of feminism within your works? Since you all gave me your definitions, how are you showing it? Deborah, did you want to go first?
How am I showing feminists in my work? I think when I have raised fist and I have the you know, the person, the child looking you directly in your face as an independent person. I have it in the clothes that they wear. I mean, it's just a lot of the big hands, you know, the power, you know, and the fierceness of the kids. I think those are symbols of feminism in my work.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I can see that
Yeah.
with the hands. Grace, what about you? How are you showing your definition of feminism in your work?
I would say like being a Black woman, painting Black women is to me an empowering act in itself, because you're taking ownership over your image and you're really painting, I'm really painting women in a way that fits my narrative and my personal story. So in that in itself to me is an empowering act. If you think about the history of paintings with women in it, they've always been painted by men. And so there's this like this fantasy or this sexualization of the female body because of that. And I remember talking to this guy and he was like looking at my work and he's like, yeah, I could tell your work is done by a woman by the way you paint the bodies. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah. He's like, you don't draw like the stereotypical Black woman bodies. Like you draw different types and different ways. It just wasn't like, I guess that seeing it through that fantasy like lens of the female body, you know? And so I think that in itself is an empowering act, is we're taking ownership over our own images and being the authors of our own narrative. And I think that is a feminist act in itself.
Nice. Oh yeah, that's definitely true. I get that. And Genevieve, how are you showing your definition of feminism in your work?
I think just openly working through my own shit, and while at the same time like realizing that, you know, other folks are going through that too, and kind of just being I don't know, often I'll say like unapologetically feminine in terms of the palette, and not being scared of the things that we're told to kind of steer away, or that we won't be taken seriously because we're using certain symbols. I use a lot of flowers in my work, and those are all symbols for me of strength, and I just uplifting those things and flipping the stereotypes on their head, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. Sticking it to the system. One piece of artwork at a time. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna open it up for questions and let's see what we have. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. Each of you play with history in interesting ways. Can you talk a bit more about the ways in which you imagine your contemporary images in dialogue with history or historical imagery?
I guess for me is that remember earlier you said you saw Rosa Parks' hands in my work. I use James Baldwin, Sidney Poitier. I use a lot of pop culture references, a lot of famous people in my work, and so those images and those body parts are actually with girls who are created today, right now, talking about issues that, you know, we're still talking about these issues, but they're new and they're live and they're in color. And so my work, you know, goes back and forth in the clothes that I choose and the history of the images that I put in my work. So I think because I'm doing them now today, I'm in dialogue with the past in my work.
Oh, nice, nice. And then Genevieve, you have a little bit too in your works. You do a little nod.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how our work will be perceived in the future. But I'm interested in pulling from imagery from the past to address the fact that, a lot of folks like to think we've come so far, but we really haven't, because I wouldn't be able to pull these images and be able to make similar statements about what's happening based on that. So just kind of the hope is that when I'm dead and gone, that people aren't pulling from my work to be like, see, this is still happening. Hopefully it's like, they're like, oh, I can't believe we were so, out of touch, back then. And yeah, hopefully it's gone a lot further.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And Grace, what about you? Because I know you had your the New Yorker piece.
Yeah, I think for the Sojourner Truth cover for the New Yorker, it was about the 100th anniversary for women's voting rights. But after looking at the history of voting rights for women, women of color weren't able to vote until 1965. So I thought, like we're celebrating this 100-year anniversary, but it doesn't apply to all women in the U.S. And so I really wanted to address that. That issue that we were having in the country, that we've only been able to vote for the past like 60 years. And Sojourner Truth to me is the greatest American alive. She was born into slavery. She managed to escape and make such an impact on the world. And she coined the phrase, "Ain't I a woman?" And it talks about, her speech talks about the attack on Black womanhood. She was so ahead of her time, and she's did so much with her life. She encouraged women of color to be able to vote, and talked about the importance of voting and the impact that it had. And I wanted to put her on the cover to kind of show the seed that was planted for us to be able to vote to this day. And it's really important to talk about history. Like sometimes in my work, I play around with different collage elements. I'm really inspired by Romare Bearden and how it's using these like found objects and these scans and these printmaking different materialities to create this image. And that's something that I strive for in my work.
Oh yeah, you can definitely see that. And then, I think, what you're saying is right. Like we didn't necessarily have the right until 65. So those dates are a little bit off. That media is trying to tell, and it goes into further, right? Like, thinking about feminism and then just Black feminism and what that means, and how we're creating and how we're telling that story and that narrative. We all weren't, when people talk about like the 4th of July or Independence Day, well, we all weren't independent, only a certain group. So can we really celebrate? Can we really, have that moment? Let me see, let me do another question. It seems like a lot of people are asking everyone, what are your sources for inspiration? Everybody wants to know. So Deborah, when you're in your studio, how are you thinking about, what images you want to create, or do you start off with like a sketch of a body and then you're putting your, the collage pieces? How are you getting inspired to do your work? And I think this is open for everyone.
For me, it's the news. It's just what I want to talk about at that time. Have I created a series that I really didn't finish up? I want to do a deeper dive in it. Do I have more time to do works? So, when I do my collages, it's just, I start with the faces and try to figure out what I want to say and how many works that I need to say that in. So I don't kind of have a rhyme or reason how I do things. It's just that I just work, as much as I can. Mm-hmm.
Nice, nice. And then, Grace, what about you? How are you thinking about the figures? Are they people in your life? Are they just images in your head? How are you getting inspired to create, your paintings and collages?
Yeah, I think it comes from just a wide source of imagery. I mean, we see so much imagery every day because of social media and Facebook. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something deep in my subconscious that I saw my Instagram feed. But in regards to intentional research, I'm really inspired by dance poses, and I often look at poses of dancers, whether it be my friends or dancers that I follow online, or looking at actual performances. And with the faces, I often, the eyes are often collaged, and I use a new set of eyes for each image. And so each one has kind of like a distinct memory with the eyes. And so for me, it's kind of like an intuitive process. I use different collage materials, like National Geographic has tons of nature that I can use to image transfer. I also look at some fashion magazines, and even the clothing that we see people wear on the streets. Whenever I go to Brooklyn, I get super inspired by the different fashions. And even when I traveled to Senegal, I took so many pictures of the patterns, and I kind of just have this compilation of so much different imagery. So it's really just an intuitive process for me for the most part.
Great, great. And then Genevieve, what about you as you're, thinking about what character is going to be next? What's your inspiration?
If I'm again, similar to the others, I'm kind of a quiet observer. I'm always just gathering little bits of information. When I'm in LA, it's really nice. It's like when I'm driving around, I'm like, oh, there's a character, or like a portion of a character, or, and just sources to, the different wigs that I can acquire. And yeah, so I'm not, when I kind of make a fuller body of work, it might start with a quote or some line that I saw in a movie or heard in a movie. If I hear something that moves me, then I'm going to write that down. So in between shows, it's like you're kind of rebooting, catching up, because a lot of us kind of go into a little zone, a cave, and we almost close out the outside world once we know what we're trying to get at. And then I kind of figure out what my color palette is going to be. I kind of address all the ways I work for a show. So I kind of get the photography out of the way so that can start getting figured out. And then I'll go into the collage aspects of it and the sculptural aspects. And then kind of towards the end will be more of the installation, which kind of happens really on site. And often I'm not really sure what I'm going to get. I have a loose vision in my mind, and a lot of trust from curators. Just kind of, make the thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it looks like we have time for just one more question. And this is another one for the group. This is a good one. Okay. Is there an aspect or element of femininity that you still find difficult to depict in your work?
No. That's my answer.
Genevieve, what about you?
Femininity is this fluid thing. It's morphic. I think maybe whoever's asking that has a very distinct thought of what that is. And I think what we're kind of trying to say that it's changing, it's evolving, and we're not stuck to presenting it in a one specific way.
Yeah, right, absolutely. Grace, what's your final answer?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what everyone was saying. femininity is so diverse, it's so wide, it's so big. And I think what we're really trying to do in our work is show femininity from our own perspective. So to me, there's no wrong way to show femininity. So therefore, there's nothing difficult to depict in that way.
Wonderful. Oh, I love it. Well, I just wanted to say to you all, thank you so much. Alessandra, do we have time for one more quick question? No? Okay. Well, it was such a pleasure to be able to be here with you all tonight, this evening, late afternoon, wherever we all are. And thank you again for, the visitors. Even though we didn't see you, your presence was felt. And I just want to wish everyone a happy Women's History Month. Celebrate with, friends and family. Support, Black women for sure. Support these artists. Follow them. You're not going to regret it. I mean, I'm letting you know now. You're just going to be in awe every time you go to see their show. You're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that was even possible. It is possible with these women. Anything is possible. And I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you to all the panelists. May we all continue to cherish, honor, and celebrate the dynamic aspects of all of our beauty, creativity, and femininity, and its multitude and diversity. And again, to Taylor's point, please do follow everybody on social media. Keep an eye out on their work, buy their work. Pay Black women, always pay Black women. That's one way you can always show your appreciation, and we honor. And we look forward to seeing you back at CAM very, very, very soon, indoors very safely. Thank you again to everybody. Be safe, be well. And until we see you in person, have a great night and be safe. Everybody be well. Have a good one.